Hi, friends. How's it going? I hope you guys had a great spring break and that you're ready to do some schoolwork this week and kind of jump back into a routine of some sort. So, this book is a book that I was planning on reading to you this week at school because the Reynoldsburg High School was actually, or Summit Campus, I believe, they were actually putting on this play. So, this was a book that all of the third graders were planning on reading. So, I thought I would read a little bit to you each day this week. There are, I believe, 6 chapters. So this book is called The 100 Dresses by Helen Estes. She wrote this book over 60 years ago. So this is a really beloved classic. A lot of people really, really enjoy this book. If you actually look here, you'll notice that there's a medal. So it's not the Caldecott, but it is the Newbery Honor, which is an award that goes to really popular and honored children's books. Now, this version, it's still the book written by Helen Estes. However, her daughter kind of took this and republished it. So there's actually a letter from the daughter in here that I would like to read to you first before getting into the story. Illustrations are done by Louis Slobodkin. I don't know how to pronounce his name. The 100 Dresses. So it says, a letter to readers. When I am asked about my mother's book, The 100 Dresses, I often wonder what to say. What more meaning could my words give to a book that, although written 60 years ago, continues to reach the hearts of children around the world? What answers could I give the children who still write letters of thanks and praise to my mother? Is this a true story? They ask. Did this happen to you? Well, most stories are based on both fact and fiction, and certainly this is true for The 100 Dresses. Years ago, I asked my mother why she had written this story. She told me about a classmate in her elementary school who had been taunted because she wore the same dress to school every day, and because her Polish name was unusual and different for many to pronounce. My mother was in school during World War I, and Polish names were uncommon then, in the small town of West Haven, Connecticut. Where my mother grew up and where the story takes place, her classmate wore the same dress to school each day because it was the only one she had. This little girl moved away to New York City in the middle of the school year, and my mother, as sometimes happens in real life, did not have the opportunity to tell her she was sorry. My mother never forgot the little girl who had been so badly treated. She herself knew what it was like to be poor as a child, to always be cold in winter, to wear clothes passed down to her by her sister. But it was for this reason. But was this the reason to tease or be teased? Was it right to play with the feelings of one who was different? What could she do so many years later, my mother wondered, to set things right? To reach out to the girl who had stood lonely and silent against the red brick wall of the school. Well, she thought, the one thing she could do was to write her story. And so, The 100 Dresses was born. Was the character Maddie based on my mother? Probably. Did Wanda really have 100 dresses at home? Certainly, in her imagination, she did. Decades later, The 100 Dresses is still loved by children. Not long ago, I received a letter from a little girl in Southern California. She was especially moved by Wanda's ability to forgive. She wrote, "Seeing people for themselves from the inside is one lesson I learned from Wanda. She forgave both Peggy and Maddie, even though she had to put up with them every day. I am grateful to all the children who continue to love this extraordinary story. May the 100 Dresses live on for many, many more years. Helen Estes. So Helen is the daughter of Eleanor, who actually wrote this book. Table of contents. I'll let you take a look at those. Chapter 1, Wanda. I want you to be able to see the illustrations. Today, Monday, Wanda Petronsky was not in her seat, but nobody, not even Peggy and Madeline, Peggy and Madeline, the girls who started all the fun, noticed her absence. Usually, Wanda sat in the next to the last seat, in the last row in room 13. She sat in the corner of the room where the rough boys, who did not make good marks on their report cards, sat. The corner of the room where there was most scuffling of feet, most roars of laughter when anything funny was said, and most mud and dirt on the floor. Wanda did not sit there because she was rough and noisy. On the contrary, she was very quiet and rarely said anything at all. And nobody had ever heard her laugh out loud. Sometimes she twisted her mouth into a crooked sort of smile, but that was all. Nobody knew exactly why Wanda sat in that seat, unless it was because she came all the way from Boggins Heights, and her feet were usually caked with dry mud that she picked up coming down the country roads. Maybe the teacher liked to keep all the children who were apt to come in with dirty shoes in one corner of the room. But no one really thought much about Wanda Petronsky once she was in the classroom. The time they thought about her was outside of school hours, at noontime when they were coming back to school, or in the morning early before school began, when groups of 2 or 3 or even more would be talking and laughing on their way to the schoolyard. Then sometimes they waited for Wanda to have fun with her. The next day, Tuesday, Wanda was not in school either, and nobody noticed her absence again, except the teacher and probably Big Bill Byron, who sat in the seat behind Wanda's, and who could now put his long legs around her empty desk, one on each side, and sit there like a frog, to the great entertainment of all in his corner of the room. But on Wednesday, Peggy and Maddie, who sat in the front row along the other children, who got good marks and didn't track in a whole lot of mud, did notice that Wanda wasn't there. Peggy was the most popular girl in school. She was pretty, she had many pretty clothes, and her auburn hair was curly. Maddie was her closest friend. The reason Peggy and Maddie noticed Wanda's absence was because Wanda had made them late to school. They had waited and waited for Wanda to have some fun with her, and she just hadn't come. They kept thinking she'd come any minute. They saw Jack Beggles running to school, his necktie askew, and his cap at a precarious tilt. They knew it must be late, for he always managed to slide into his chair exactly when the bell rang, as though he were making a touchdown. Still, they waited 1 minute more and 1 minute more, hoping she'd come, but finally they had to race off without seeing her. The 2 girls reached their classroom after the doors had been closed. The children were reciting in unison the Gettysburg Address, for that was the way Miss Mason had always began the session. Peggy and Maddie slipped into their seats, just as the class was saying the last lines. That these dead shall not have died in vain, that the nation shall, under God, have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. The next chapter is called The Dresses Game. I will be back on tomorrow to read chapter 2. I hope you'd enjoyed it.